The irony wasn't lost on me that I learned the truth about my marriage while standing in the frozen foods aisle at Wegmans, staring at a wall of ice cream containers like they held the secrets of the universe. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor. "Saw the moving truck at your house. Jared's really going through with it, huh?" That's when it hit me. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't coming back to grovel or beg me to work things out. He was actually, genuinely, completely done with me. I'm Kendall, by the way. 43 years old, recently separated, and apparently much less perceptive about my own life than I thought. The woman who prided herself on being brutally honest and realistic had somehow missed the fact that her husband of 11 years had reached his limit. But let me back up, because this story doesn't start with moving trucks or frozen vegetables. It starts about 8 months earlier, on a Sunday morning in our kitchen in suburban Cleveland, with what I thought was just another one of our typical disagreements. Jared was sitting at our breakfast table, laptop open, scrolling through job listings with the kind of intensity most people reserve for medical test results. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, and he was still in the ratty Ohio State t-shirt he'd slept in. Sunday mornings used to be our time, lazy breakfast, maybe a walk around the neighborhood, planning our week together. But for the past few months, he'd been spending them hunched over his computer, applying for jobs with an urgency that frankly irritated me. "Another rejection from the museum," he said without looking up. "They went with someone with more curatorial experience." I was loading the dishwasher, probably more aggressively than necessary. "Maybe you should consider expanding your search. I mean, how many art history positions can there possibly be in Cleveland?" He looked up then, and I caught something in his expression, a flicker of hurt that he quickly covered. "I've been thinking about that. There's a position at a gallery in Charleston that looks promising, and one in Santa Fe." "Santa Fe?" I stopped mid-rinse. "Jared, we live here. My practice is here. We can't just uproot our entire lives because you can't find the perfect job." "It's not about the perfect job, Kendall. It's about finding work that actually uses my degree. I've been substitute teaching and working at that frame shop for 2 years now." I turned to face him fully, dish towel in hand. "And that's not real work. Plenty of people would be grateful to have steady employment." "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it, though? You've always been like this, Jared. Something doesn't go exactly according to your grand plan, and suddenly it's this huge crisis. You can't handle any real adversity." The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was frustrated. I'd built my dental practice from nothing, worked 60-hour weeks for years, dealt with difficult patients and insurance companies and staff drama. Real problems. Adult problems. Meanwhile, my husband was having an existential crisis because he couldn't find his dream job in his exact preferred field in our exact preferred city. Jared closed the laptop slowly. "Real adversity." "You know what I mean. You've never had to worry about keeping a roof over your head or putting food on the table. You've never had to make the kind of choices that actual adults make when life doesn't hand them everything they want." "I see." He stood up, coffee mug in hand. "So working 3 jobs to pay for grad school while my dad was dying of cancer, that wasn't real adversity." I felt a small pang of guilt but pushed it away. "That's not what I'm saying, and you know it. I'm saying you don't handle disappointment well. You fold under pressure." He stared at me for a long moment, and I thought he was going to argue back. Instead, he just nodded slowly. "Okay, Kendall, I hear you." That should have been my first warning. Jared wasn't a nod and walk away kind of person. He was a talk it out, analyze every angle, discuss until we understand each other kind of person. But I was so caught up in my own righteousness that I didn't notice the shift. Over the next few weeks, things seemed to settle into a new normal. Jared stopped talking about job applications over breakfast. He stopped mentioning the opportunities in other cities. He even seemed more upbeat, more present in our day-to-day life. I congratulated myself on helping him gain some perspective. What I didn't realize was that he'd simply stopped including me in his decision-making process. The signs were there if I'd been paying attention. He started staying up later, claiming he was reading, but when I glanced at his nightstand, I saw books I'd never noticed before, titles about career transitions and life changes. He began taking long walks by himself, something he'd never done before. When I asked about them, he'd just say he was clearing his head. His phone started buzzing with calls during dinner, and he'd excuse himself to take them in the other room. When I asked who was calling, he'd give vague answers about networking or catching up with old colleagues. I should have been curious about the sudden secrecy from a man who'd always been an open book. Instead, I was relieved that he'd stopped what I saw as his constant complaining about his job situation. I thought I'd successfully helped him accept reality. I thought I'd been a good wife by bringing him back down to earth. The truth was, I'd been so focused on being right that I'd completely missed what was actually happening. While I was congratulating myself on my practical wisdom, Jared was quietly, methodically, systematically planning his exit from our marriage. He wasn't sulking or having a breakdown. He was problem-solving with the kind of strategic thinking I claimed he lacked. He researched divorce lawyers before he contacted one. He analyzed our financial situation and figured out how to divide assets fairly. He explored job opportunities not just in Santa Fe, but in several cities, weighing the pros and cons of each. He researched cost of living, housing markets, and social opportunities in each location. He even looked into the logistics of moving across the country, truck rentals, storage options, utility transfers. But perhaps most tellingly, he started going to therapy. Not couples counseling, which might have clued me into his unhappiness, but individual therapy to work through his own feelings about our marriage. He spent weeks talking to a professional about whether his concerns were valid, whether he was being reasonable, whether there was a way to salvage what we had. The therapist, he later told me, had asked him a simple question that changed everything. If your best friend came to you and described the way your wife speaks to you, what would you tell them? Jared said he realized he'd tell his friend to leave. He realized he'd been accepting treatment from me that he'd never tolerate from anyone else in his life. These 7 paragraphs represent the period I thought everything was fine, the weeks when I believed I'd successfully managed another problem in our marriage. In reality, it was the period when my husband was demonstrating exactly the kind of adult problem-solving skills I'd accused him of lacking. The first sign came when I found a stack of books on the kitchen counter, guides to starting over after divorce, financial planning for singles, even one about dating after 40. I laughed when I saw them. Planning ahead, I asked when he came into the kitchen. Something like that, he said, not meeting my eyes. Very funny, though I have to say the dating book is a bit much. You do realize you're married, right? He looked at me then, and there was something in his expression that made my stomach flutter with unease. For now, I assumed he was still being dramatic. Jared had always been prone to grand gestures and emotional declarations. In college, he'd once threatened to drop out of art history and become a carpenter because he was frustrated with a professor. He'd gotten over it. He always got over it. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't just threatening. He was planning. The real wake-up call came on a Wednesday evening in March. I'd had a particularly brutal day at the office. 3 root canals, a difficult crown preparation, and a patient who'd screamed at my receptionist about insurance co-pays. I came home exhausted, looking forward to collapsing on the couch with takeout and mindless television. Instead, I found Jared in the living room with a stack of papers spread across the coffee table. "What's all this?" I asked, dropping my bag by the door. "Divorce papers," he said simply. "I picked them up from the lawyer today." I stared at him. "You went to a lawyer." "I did, without telling me. I told you I was thinking about it. You said I couldn't handle real problems." He gestured to the papers. "This seems pretty real to me." I sank into the armchair across from him, suddenly feeling very tired. "Jared, come on, you're being ridiculous. We're having a rough patch, but that doesn't mean we need to get divorced." "A rough patch." He repeated the words like they were foreign. "Is that what you call it when your wife tells you you're not capable of handling adult responsibilities?" "I never said that." "You said I couldn't handle real problems. You said I fold under pressure. You said I don't make the kind of choices that actual adults make." His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "If those aren't adult responsibilities, what are they?" "You're twisting my words." "Am I? Because I've been thinking about this for weeks, Kendall. I've been trying to figure out when you started seeing me as someone who disappoints you instead of someone you love. And I keep coming back to that morning in the kitchen When you looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum instead of your husband trying to figure out his career. I opened my mouth to argue, but he held up a hand. I got the job in Santa Fe, he said quietly. What? The gallery position. They offered it to me yesterday. Good salary, benefits, opportunity to curate my own exhibitions. It's everything I've been working toward. I felt like the room was tilting. You're not seriously considering taking it. I already accepted. Jared, that's insane. You can't just... Why not? For the first time, his voice had an edge. What's keeping me here? A wife who thinks I'm incapable of handling real problems. A wife who sees my career struggles as personal failings rather than challenges to work through together. I never said your career struggles were personal failings. Didn't you? When you suggested I was being unrealistic about finding work in my field. When you implied that I should just be grateful for any job, regardless of whether it uses my education or challenges me. When you said I couldn't handle real adversity. I stared at the divorce papers, trying to process what was happening. So you're just going to run away, move across the country because things got difficult. I'm going to take a job that's perfect for me in a place where I can build the career I want. And I'm going to do it without someone constantly questioning whether I'm capable of adult decision-making. I never questioned your capabilities. I was trying to help you be realistic. No, Kendall, you were trying to manage me. There's a difference. That stung because it was true. I had been managing him the way I managed everything else in our lives. I managed our finances, our social calendar, our home maintenance, our retirement planning. I managed it all because I was good at it and because, if I'm being honest, I liked being in control. But somewhere along the way, I'd started managing Jared too. Managing his expectations, his career disappointments, his responses to setbacks. I'd convinced myself I was being supportive, but what I'd really been doing was treating him like another item on my to-do list. I don't want to get divorced, I said quietly. I know, but I can't stay married to someone who sees me as a problem to be solved rather than a partner to be supported. That's not how I see you. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked me how I was feeling about my job search instead of telling me what I should do about it? When's the last time you listened to my concerns without immediately offering solutions or perspectives I didn't ask for? I tried to think of an example, but came up empty. I was trying to help. I know you were, but help isn't the same as support, and management isn't the same as partnership. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of 11 years settling between us like dust. I looked around our living room, the couch we'd picked out together, the bookshelves full of his art books and my professional journals, the photographs from our trips to Italy and Iceland and the Grand Canyon. All of it suddenly felt very fragile. What if I change? I asked finally. What if I learn to be more supportive? Change into what? Someone who doesn't have opinions about my career. Someone who doesn't want to solve problems. That's not who you are, Kendall, and it's not who I want you to be. Then what do you want? He leaned back against the couch, looking older than his 41 years. I want to be with someone who believes I'm capable of handling my own life. I want to be with someone who sees my struggles as temporary challenges rather than permanent character flaws. I want to be with someone who trusts me to make good decisions, even when those decisions are different from what she would do. I do trust you. Do you? Because when I told you about the positions in other cities, your first response was to tell me we couldn't move. You didn't ask me what I thought about the opportunities, or how I felt about potentially relocating, or whether I wanted to explore the options together. You just shut it down. He was right, and we both knew it. I'd been so focused on protecting our status quo that I'd never stopped to consider whether that status quo was actually working for both of us. I'm scared, I admitted. I'm scared of starting over somewhere new. I'm scared of leaving my practice and my patience and the life I've built here. I know, and those are valid fears. But instead of sharing them with me so we could figure out a solution together, you turned them into reasons why I should give up on what I wanted. I didn't mean to. I know you didn't, but intention isn't the same as impact. He was quiet for a moment, then added, I've been thinking about what you said, about me not being able to handle real problems. Do you know what I realized? You're right. I can't handle the problem of being married to someone who doesn't respect me. I can't handle the problem of feeling like I have to justify my dreams to my own wife. I I can't handle the problem of being seen as inadequate by the person who's supposed to love me most. I do love you. I know you do, but love isn't enough if it comes with conditions. And your love has started to feel conditional on me being the version of myself that you're most comfortable with. I wanted to argue, but the words stuck in my throat because he was right. I had been trying to shape him into a version of himself that fit more neatly into my vision of our life together. I'd been loving him conditionally, even though I'd never consciously acknowledged it. So what happens now? I asked. Now I move to Santa Fe and start my new job, and you decide whether you want to fight for this marriage or sign these papers. That's not fair. You're the one who's leaving. I'm the one who's choosing to leave rather than continue being diminished. There's a difference. I never tried to diminish you, maybe not intentionally. But when you consistently question someone's judgment, when you consistently offer unsolicited advice, when you consistently imply that their approach to problems is wrong, that's diminishing, even if you don't mean it that way. I felt tears prick my eyes. I don't know how to be different. Maybe that's the real problem, he said gently. Maybe you don't want to be different. Maybe you want a husband who's grateful for your management instead of a husband who wants to be your equal partner. That's not true, isn't it? Be honest, Kendall. When you think about our marriage, do you see two people supporting each other through life's challenges? Or do you see yourself as the competent one and me as the one who needs guidance? I opened my mouth to deny it, but stopped. Because when I really thought about it, that was exactly how I'd been seeing our marriage. I was the responsible one, the practical one, the one who made the tough decisions and kept us on track. Jared was the dreamer, the idealist, the one who needed to be brought back down to earth. I don't know when I started thinking that way, I said quietly. I do. It was gradual, but it started when you opened your practice and I was still in grad school. You were building something concrete and measurable, and I was studying art history and writing papers about medieval tapestries. And somewhere along the way, your work started to seem more legitimate than mine. Your work is legitimate. I know that. But I don't think you know it. Not really. I think you see my career as a nice hobby that I should be willing to sacrifice for more practical concerns. He was right again. I'd never thought of it that way, but that was exactly how I'd been treating his career. Like something optional, something expendable, something that could be set aside when real life intervened. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix the fundamental problem, which is that we want different things from this marriage. You want a partnership where you're in charge, and I want a partnership where we're equals. What if I learn to see you as an equal? What if you don't? What if this is just who you are, and asking you to change is as unfair as you asking me to change? I didn't have an answer for that. Jared left for Santa Fe 6 weeks later. I didn't sign the divorce papers, but I didn't fight them either. I was still trying to process what had happened, still trying to understand how I'd gone from being a supportive wife to being someone my husband needed to escape from. The first few months were brutal. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and taking on extra patients. I told myself I was fine, that I was better off without someone who couldn't appreciate everything I'd done for our marriage. I told myself Jared was being dramatic, that he'd realize his mistake and come back. But deep down, I knew he was right about everything. I had been managing him. I had been treating him like he needed my guidance rather than my support. I had been loving him conditionally, even though I'd never admitted it to myself. The real revelation came about 4 months after he left, when I ran into his former colleague Helen at the grocery store. She asked how I was doing, and I gave her my standard response about keeping busy and focusing on my practice. I saw Jared's exhibition review in Art Monthly, she said. He must be so proud, finally getting the recognition he deserves. I hadn't known about any exhibition, let alone a review. Exhibition! The one he curated at the gallery in Santa Fe. Landscape and memory, contemporary Southwestern artists. It got a wonderful write-up. The reviewer called it a masterful exploration of place and identity and said Jared had an intuitive understanding of how to create dialogue between diverse artistic voices. I went home and looked up the review online. There were photos of the exhibition, and Jared standing next to some of the pieces, looking happier and more confident than I'd seen him in years. The review praised not just the show, but his curatorial vision, his ability to bring together artists from different backgrounds and create something meaningful. This was the man I'd told couldn't handle real problems. This was the man I'd thought needed my guidance to navigate life's challenges. I called him that night. "I saw the review," I said when he answered. "Which review?" "Art Monthly, the exhibition." There was a pause. "Oh, that. Jared, it's incredible. You should be so proud." "I am," he said simply. "It's exactly the kind of work I wanted to be doing." "I'm sorry I couldn't see it," I said. "I'm sorry I couldn't see you." "I know you are." "Are you happy?" Another pause. "Yeah, I am. I'm really happy." And I could hear it in his voice, a lightness that had been missing for the last few years of our marriage. He sounded like himself again, like the man I'd fallen in love with in graduate school who'd talk for hours about art and beauty and the ways humans express meaning through creativity. "I'm glad," I said and meant it. "How are you doing?" "I'm learning," I said. "I'm learning a lot about myself." "That's good. That's important." We talked for a few more minutes, carefully polite, like strangers who'd once known each other well. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. Not relief that he was gone, but relief that he was happy. Relief that he'd found what he was looking for. I signed the divorce papers the next week. That was 8 months ago. I'm still learning, still trying to understand the person I became somewhere along the way and the person I want to be going forward. I've started seeing a counselor, not to fix myself, but to understand myself better. I've started asking my staff for their input instead of just telling them what to do. I've started catching myself when I want to offer unsolicited advice to friends and family. It's harder than I expected, learning to support without managing, to love without controlling. But it's also liberating in ways I didn't anticipate. I'm discovering that I don't have to be in charge of everything to be valuable. I don't have to solve everyone's problems to be helpful. Last month, I got an invitation to Jared's next exhibition opening. I won't go. That would be weird for both of us, but I'll follow the coverage online. I want to see what he creates next, want to witness the career he's building for himself. And maybe someday, I'll meet someone who I can learn to love without trying to change. Someone whose dreams I can support without trying to manage. Someone who I can see as an equal partner rather than a project to be improved. But first, I need to finish learning how to be that kind of person. It turns out that was the real problem all along. Not that Jared couldn't handle real problems, but that I couldn't handle letting him handle them himself. The irony is that he proved exactly how capable he was of handling real problems by handling the biggest one of all, realizing that our marriage wasn't working and having the courage to leave. I told my husband he couldn't handle real problems. He handled losing me just fine. And honestly, I'm proud of him for it.